Okay, hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is session 1 on Power Panels, the series where we're going to highlight the different types of power. And we're going to do that by bringing in different professionals from across our communities that are highlighting their work as well as the impact that they're already having. So it's going to be a range of industries, a range of hats that everyone's wearing. But at first, I would like to invite our panelists to come on off and take themselves off mute as well. Let's see your faces because just got to do a quick roll call. I want to make sure that we're checked in and locked and loaded. So I want to introduce, before I get into anything else, our panelists. We have Lemeia Reddick, we have Chernise Clayton, we have Keonte Beals, and we have Derico Symonds. They'll be joining us tonight. They'll be speaking, wearing the many hats, highlighting the powerful voices that they have. But the overall flow this evening, folks, is to really celebrate the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and the personal power that each of our panelists have already embodied. And we're going to allow them to highlight, take us through that journey of how they've used it to transfer their lived experience to get into a place where they can celebrate and where they can thrive. So before I go into any more, I'm already getting too jazzed up. So I want to do the welcome and the housekeeping. So our panelists and myself, just the host, will be the only ones whose videos and whose audios you can see for this evening. What we're going to ask is that if you do have questions or if you're interested, you have your thoughts, maybe your minds are going, make sure you stay in the chat. As well, always, ground rules. This is a safe space. We're focusing on topics. Of course, this is at the intersection. Of course, it's African Heritage Month, but we want to be mindful of everyone is coming here from a different lived experience, a different belief, maybe different faith system. But we want to make sure that the first thing that we center is respect, right? So as we get into this, I want to start off and kick it off with doing the ancestral as well as the land acknowledgement. So in African Heritage Month, especially as a part of our process as African people or people of African descent, wherever you are across the diaspora, it's critical that we give thanks to the people that have impacted us along our journey. We have to give thanks and give a moment of pause to the people who've come before us, our ancestors. And especially in this African Heritage Month, when we talk about ancestors, we're not just talking about the ancestors over the last 400 years. We're talking about the ancestors over the last thousands of years, because we as African descended peoples have been on this earth for thousands of years in different civilizations. We've impacted, engaged, informed education, health care, justice. We've built these systems, and yet our representation and our ability to thrive currently is not the same. And so as we're diving into this, it's important to always remember the people that came before us and the opportunities that we now all have, regardless of the power and privilege we have, is thanks to the people that came before us. So just a moment of pause to give thanks to our ancestors. Thank you. And as a next step, even though it's virtual, as is the process, we must give thanks. We must be very real in acknowledging this is all in Mi'kmaq, or wherever you are on Turtle Island, acknowledging that this is unceded, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. And as you go across the waterland, the range from across just the Mi'kmaq Nation to other persons who are indigenous to these lands over, again, the last thousands of years. It's important that we acknowledge this, whether you come here as a settler, whether you're an indigenous Black Nova Scotian, like a lot of us see here today. We're on these lands and we're a part of the treaties, which means that we have to uphold this. How? We have to be respectful. We have to try to collaborate with one another, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to taking action and to doing better in this space and honoring each other. So I just want to give thanks for this space and to be here with you all this evening. Without further ado, I want to just give you a brief roadmap of what we're going to dive into shortly before passing it over to the panelists, which I'm excited, just trying to hold it back, to hear the voices from. So the flow of the evening, just checked off the welcome and the housekeeping, the land acknowledgement, as well as the ancestral acknowledgement. So what we're going to move into next is a brief intro, I'm not going to do the full justice, of each of our panelists before I actually hand it over and give them the space to give us a little bit of an intro on who they are and what they've been up to. Next, we'll move into kind of our round table discussion and we're going to jump into kind of the three themes of personal power. The first one, we're going to explore what the lived experience is, how they've been able to move and mobilize around their knowledge, the importance of finding self on the journey, and how to commit to yourself on your own terms. Next, we're going to explore overcoming barriers. So what are the everyday realities that we experience as young professionals, but especially professionals and persons of African descent? How do we navigate? How do we move in the climate? How do we be creative to still bring our magic into these situations? And the third one, which I'm super excited to have us all, everybody in attendance, committing to, thriving and mobilizing in two parts. How can we mobilize at an individual level, both to build our own personal power and find it? Secondly, how can we take action around addressing racism, discrimination, and all the other issues? Then we'll open it up to the live audience for Q&A, and we'll check out to make sure everybody has a voice. And then we'll do a close and explore what it looks like for the follow-up. So before I go any further, what I'm going to go ahead and do is start with our brief bios. Chernise, if I could start with you, and Clayton, give everyone an intro, and then I'll pass it over. So I want to welcome Chernise Clayton, who, as I would describe, is an entrepreneur wearing many hats, but fitness, health specialist. Someone who is from, I would say, on the other side of the province, but found her way, and we connected at St. Mary's, through fitness, and through a lot of shared, what I would say shared vibes in terms of, celebrating our community, excited to really explore how we can get fitness and self-care and health more embedded into the work that we're doing as a daily reality. I want to take it over to Mr. Beals, Keonte Beals, who I don't even know all the hats. I can't speak to them so much. We got author, we got artist, producer, oh my goodness, singer-songwriter, just gonna name a few, but someone who is as well very much so in the community, at the intersection of industry, engaging with government, youth, and everybody else. So someone who I'm very excited to have here and give voice. Next up, I'd like to go to Miss Reddick, Lemeia, again, wearing many hats, a facilitator, public speaker, consultant. I don't know if brewmaster is the official terminology, but I know that you're making waves in there as well. Oh my goodness. So in the hospitality side as well, but wearing many hats, someone who I've known for quite some time and very excited to collaborate with, always bringing the passion and the energy and finding ways to center the voices of people who are not in the spaces in an authentic way. So thank you so much for joining us, Lemeia. And last but not least, Derico. Mr. Symonds, I would love to welcome you this evening. You are someone who's an advocate, not just for youth, but for change at all levels. So that's in government, in industry, in community, and really focusing on mobilizing. So you're another person who, carries yourself very well with your personal power. It shows, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts as we go through today's conversation and discussion. So if I may, just thinking from an equity lens, Lemeia, if I could hand it over to you, maybe to give that first intro of who you are. Got a few minutes, please.
Wow, sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting when folks, introduce me, what they'll say. It's always different each time. Brewmaster, I kind of like that. But no, I am Lemeia Reddick. Lately I've been saying that I am the daughter, sister, friend, auntie, just kind of really connecting to the personal aspects of who I am right now, and just like, family is so huge to me. And so, that's my entry point. And speaking to that, I'm from a community called North Preston. And, when we think about, historical, lenses and all that, who you are for us and for me is really in relation to where I'm from. And so, I say Lemeia Reddick, from North Preston. And, I'm an artist, I think that's really the space that I'm living in most days right now. And, the space where I'm actually feeling really comfortable, where I wasn't always comfortable with this voice, with these stories that were coming out of me. But I think, I'm so excited about, stepping into that identity more fully, and all of the experiences that I've had of consulting, of of, all of the work that I've done, running a surf program. Like, I do a lot of things. And so, I think artist is where I'm fitting in right now in terms of where I'm at, because I'm really in that space of wanting to talk about my experiences and through different mediums. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion and to see what comes up. We haven't really had a chance to really be in many spaces with each other, talking about these things for a really long time. So I'm just feeling really honored and thankful to be here, and can't wait to hear everybody else's story. And no doubt, I know that the participants and folks that are attending will have some questions for us too. So thank you.
No, thank you. Mr. Symonds, Derico, could I pass the baton over to you, sir?
Yeah, let's do it. So, well, who am I? So, Derico Symonds, born and raised in Halifax, grew up in a community called the Pubs. I have roots in a couple of our communities in Halifax. I would say that I'm about planting as many seeds as I can, whether that's me personally doing something, or me trying to spread my experience and or knowledge to whoever I can. There were a lot of people who helped me growing up, a lot of people in community in a lot of different places. I take it as my responsibility whenever I can and however I can to give back, because I wouldn't be in any of the positions I'm in now if it was not for people, giving me a hand up and lending their time to me. I mean, I don't have brewmaster title, but I'm involved in a couple of different things. My thing is working with young people and community. That's the thing I love. That's the thing that keeps me awake. Worrying about and thinking about what can we do, how can we do better, and how can we improve. I like to talk about when I can just education or my education, just because growing up I've never really heard from younger people or people who are older that had I just was not in those conversations. So introducing myself, I just like to say that I have a master's degree, master's of education and counseling, and I'm thinking about the PhD route so I can be a doctor. And other things I'm involved in, producing a thing with Tyler Symonds, a movie, or not a movie, but like a sort of a little show, doing the youth and community thing, work at NASCAD, so Director of Opportunity and Belonging, and so a little bit into the art space. But really my thing is youth and community. How can we build? How can we grow? How can we improve? And how can we get better? Hands are in a lot of pots, but it's not about me at the end of the day. It's just about how can we all improve as a community.
Sheesh. Well, that is powerful, and I'm sorry to do it. Keonte, you're gonna have to follow that one up, sir. If I could pass the mic over to you, please do us some justice.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like you kind of covered me like pretty well. I'm doing a lot of different things, but I think the main thing for me just has been, kind of laying the platform and breaking down walls and barriers and opening doors for, youth coming after us. That's really the main thing, the main goal for me, and has been for forever now. What am I doing? Just released children's book, my very first children's book ever. And it actually is kind of highlighting exactly what I just said, just kind of planting seeds into the next generation and hoping that that brings wealth upon generations. So yeah, that's kind of just me. I'm a short and sweet guy, and
Man,
I like to have a good time. I like to have a good time and just, be involved in whatever change I can.
Thank you. To go with the flow, Miss Clayton, if I could pass it to you next, please.
Hello. Yeah, firstly, I just wanted to say, like, thanks so much for having me here to speak with you guys. It's super humbling being in a circle such as this one, to be able to hear from you guys and talk with you guys. That's huge for me. I'm more new to this, so actually a little bit about myself. So my biggest thing is health and wellness and fitness. So I've been a trainer for 4 years, and I was originally from here. I grew up in the North End until I was about 10, and then I moved to Cape Breton in a super rural area. And yeah, then I came back here when I was 17 to go to St. Mary's University. It was there that I really, had to find what I was going to do outside of sport, because coming from high school, sport ran most of my life. I was a competitive athlete in track, soccer, and basketball. So I basically was like, what do I do now? I came up to the city. I was on the work grind. So I got really into going to the gym. That kind of was my my space where I could go in, sweat, work towards a goal, which I was used to doing in that sport, atmosphere all those years. So yeah, so I took that route, and falling in love with health and wellness and how it made me feel and how it made me grow as a person really led to, I think, my success, because I was able to transition that into what I do for a living, what I do for a career. And finally now I have the ability to also bring that to my community, and be involved more in the community and sharing opportunity and providing more access to health and wellness. And what that looks like is, whether it's boot camps, going to the gym, access to physio, chiro, nutrition, anything that's gonna improve your physical well-being. That's super huge for me. Physical well-being and mental health for me go hand in hand. And I think it really, really sets this pathway to success. And me being able to share that community and to come together with the community and network with some of the people that I'm networking now, I'm like, I'm just living my best life, and I love it. And I want to be able to share that energy, share that positivity with people. Recently, we developed the Black Wellness Cooperative, and that's full of amazing, powerful, influential people, Black people from all over the province. And we're coming together basically to provide access to health and wellness, and provide knowledge and support and network and develop with the community. So super, super excited to be here and to learn from you guys and chat with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you each. Thank you each for giving us even more insights. To be honest, like, what I'm excited about is all of the many hats that each of you is wearing. The theme, the underlying themes continue to be the same, right? The commitment to community, right? And your lived experience really shaping, the moves that you're making. All right, so I would just briefly redirect all of our attendees eyes on the chat so we can see the social medias and as well as whether it's the Instagram pages or the website links. We just want to make sure that everybody has access to that early before we jump in, because people often say after the fact, oh, what is the social handles? How do I get a hold of them? Where do I get this information? Now you know it is right here. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into the next portion.
Question.
Yes.
Before you jump in, where can people find the live link? People ask me where to find it. I want to make sure it gets shared out.
I thought it was live. Listen, so it's out. So I'm going back and forth right now. Allegedly, the settings are changed to private. So once I redirect the questions back to you all, I'm going to go and keep trying to tweak with the settings because it's just trying to make me work at life. So I appreciate the insights. We're going to get these bugs worked out as best as I can, but it's also recorded, as I mentioned. So we're going to make sure that this is available to everyone that needs to see it and be a part of it. So I'm going to transition us back into the roundtable discussion. So the first question in this series, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to answer it. But I would offer is that whoever feels like they'd like to jump in first, I'll pass it right over to you. For section 1, lived experience and knowledge. So what is the importance? What has the importance for you been in finding yourself, whether it's values, goals, etc.? I believe that finding yourself is the source of your power on this journey of life. And so kind of the questions there, for you, what has the importance been in identifying your power? And how did you go about doing that? And then the second part, why is it important to commit to moving on your own terms? So whoever wants to jump in, I'll pass that over. But this is section 1, lived experience and your knowledge.
Couldn't tell if Chernise was jumping in or.
I'm trying to figure out.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
I can
you.
hear you and see you. You're muted now.
She wants to be muted. Good.
Sounds good. Lemeia or
I'll go. Yeah, I can go. I think for me, like when you asked that question, the thing that immediately came up for me was, how when I've had like such a, interesting, childhood in the sense of, how my behavior changed, and like depending on where I was. And I'm just constantly thinking about myself. I had a turning point in grade 7, in terms of what road I was going to take. I was on the path of being, and I just think about those teenage girls that are just at that place of like trying to make that choice of what kind of child are you going to be? What kind of girl are you going to be in junior high? And just those moments. And so I had some really good teachers. I had some really good, junior high teachers that really saw my leadership and, started recommending me to take things, take different leadership programs like math camp or, all of those things. And so it was really important to me that there were older people around me that saw what I had and actually wanted to pull that out and kind of put me on a path. And so I think that, I never took for granted, the opportunities when folks, put them in front of me. And I think that that's kind of, what I try to talk to young people about now is like, I'm going to expose you to a bunch of stuff and, grab what you can and run with it because there's always a learning opportunity. And so with that, you have to be not afraid to like go on a different path than your friends. You may have to, go to the camp, or, ask something to your parents and like, just fight for yourself to kind of get in some different spaces and be open to discovering what's on the other side of that. And so that's for me where it started. I got this early urge to just kind of walk in a path that challenged me. And I met a lot of friends along the way, but if I would have just stayed like unengaged, I may not have been on the journey that I'm on now or been so comfortable at 30, taking different risk in business, because I know how to kind of handle those new experiences. So I'm really excited, to kind of see how I'll continue to change and grow. And when I was young, I kind of always embraced those challenges as well. So, you just got to find that importance to kind of walk in your own path. I think that answers the question. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of felt like I had to jump in. Lemeia was saying a lot of things that were like resonating with me, especially around the turning point piece. Because, I don't know if it's like something that everyone sort of experiences, but there were many moments as I'm sort of figuring out who I am where I could have turned left or I could have turned right. And then there were many moments where there may not have even been a path. And you kind of had to do some bushwhacking to like make your own sort of lane or make your own path. Like there were, because I was the guy who played basketball, but I was doing a child and youth degree. And I could tell you how many times I got in arguments with people like, why are you doing that? You're not going to make any money. Come and do this. And so, there was just a lot of like ignoring the noise and kind of, knowing where you want to go and seeing where you want to be and like literally climbing through that forest to like make your own a sort of path where there may not have been one. And, in terms of like finding yourself and identity, for me, I think it's a constant sort of thing. I'm not sure if I fully found myself, but I can tell you that I definitely became way more grounded in who I am in my mid 20s. is sort of, I feel like I've come into who I am and who I'm going to continue to be. But there was a lot of figuring out, a lot of struggle, and a lot of sort of strain to kind of get to that place. But you know, like people, like humans, like we're actually built for struggle. We won't grow unless there's actually some pain, and pain sometimes is a motivator for change. And so, going through the struggle and the trials and the tribulations that you go through, it's a part of the game. Like it's a part of growing, and it's a part of developing. But certainly, I think like, you know, um, like identity and like finding out who you are. I'm fully grounded in who I am, but I'm constantly learning and constantly growing, because that's just how it is. You kind of have to adapt, and you kind of have to move and shake and roll with some of the punches. But having a solid foundation of this is who I am, but I'm willing to grow and I'm willing to jump into a whole bunch of different opportunities. But yeah, I mean, identity is important, but growing in the struggle as well at the same time, because there's strength in the struggle.
It's a powerful last line, is the strength in the struggle, absolutely. And I think that is the whole element, you know, highlighting with this series, the different types of power, because, you know, as you said, it becomes very difficult to grow if you're not challenged, right? Stress and struggle, all of those things are part of growing in the process, because, you know, some people say you don't just go through it, you grow through it. And I think that's an opportunity that, of course, there is some privilege, you know, with saying that, because we can't control all of the external factors. But I know everybody here on this panel, you know, what you've all highlighted and even spoken to so far is we can control our own variables, how we respond to things, how we decide whether we react or not. And, you know, I would just love to turn it over to our other panelists just to give a little bit of voice on this element before I take us on over. Keonte, want to jump in?
Sure, yeah. So like my story as far as coming to know myself, and you know, I'll put it out right from the beginning that I feel like that's a journey that we're always constantly on. Like we never truly know fully who we are, because we're always growing, we're always moving. And I'm probably the youngest person on this panelist. Yeah, maybe I'm 24. I don't know. Okay. I got you. But so yeah, you're always constantly growing. But for me, you know, I've actually always known like what I wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to be in the industry, the music industry, singing and performing and all those different things. For me, it was more of finding my own voice to stand up for what I believed in as far as my vision goes. You know, because I started so young, I started when I was 6 years old. There were people that were just kind of controlling my career and kind of putting their vision for me, or for their vision that they have for me on me, instead of my vision that I have for me. And to be honest, I didn't even take control of that until literally 2019. Full control of that in 2019. So yeah, that was a really eye-opening year. It just kind of let me and allowed me to grow, because I was uncomfortable. There were so many moments that I was uncomfortable that I felt that I couldn't just do it. A lot of moments where I felt like I definitely wanted to give up. And I didn't. I kept, you know, kind of hanging in with myself, going through those motions and just knowing that it's okay. And that feeling, like a lot of the feelings and the emotions that you're going through, is actually a part of the process of getting to know yourself and being comfortable with yourself and loving yourself, you know, in every asset, you know, from your skin to your imperfections. All those things are important and very much so necessary to growth. And you just got to be in it. Like you got to be in it. You got to stick with it. You can't give up on yourself. You definitely have to believe in yourself more than anybody else around you. And sometimes it can be tough. It can be tough. But the real moment that I actually started to see my career flourish was when I actually started to implement the vision that I've had since I was 6 years old. So this really started happening for me back in 2020, releasing my album King. And just kind of taking control of the sound and producing it myself, and writing all the tunes. And, you know, literally that album was made in this space just here in my room. And it kind of birthed a whole nother outside of my career, and it just kind of speaks to everything that I'm saying. The minute that you feel down about yourself and what's going on, it's just important to realize that every single step that you're going through is literally building you up to the exact moment of where you're supposed to be. And you literally just got to trust your process. You know, and I'm not perfect. I've never ever claimed to be. I'm still not there. I'm still working on myself. It's a process. It's a process. But I'm in it for the long run. I'm in it to win it. And I hope that, you know, something that all of us says on this panel is that we all can give you some inspiration along our journey.
Oh, thank you for giving voice to that. I would love to pass it over to Miss Clayton, please.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, so a little bit about myself with that. So basically for me, at a very young age, I really found the value of independence. And for me, I think that built a lot of my character, and that's kind of what kind of pushed me to be like how I am. So to be real, yeah, I'm young as well. I'm 24, and I've never was a public speaker. I was never that good in school. I really just focused on sport, and that's what I did. But I found power in building relationships with people and making people excited about themselves, excited about their day, and just being a positive light in the day. Lots of negativity around. Moving to Cape Breton at a young age, I was one of 5 Black kids all through school, including high school. We lived in a very white dominant community, and you know, it was very displacing moving away from my family here in Halifax to there. And I just found a lot of power in being like, I'm going to be independent. I'm going to do my own thing. I don't care that I'm different. I was a little loud. You know, I was my own self, but people were positive about it. They were like always telling me, my brother, like, you guys are very positive kids. Like, you're always coming in, put smiles on people's faces. And I was like, there's power in that. So if I feel good, they'll feel good. And I kind of went with that. I worked very hard from a young age. I realized that from a very young age, I needed to support myself financially. So that drove a lot of my independence in terms of how I valued, you know, the work ethic, and how I knew I needed a career, and I needed it fast. And I was thinking at this at a very young age. At 14, I was like, okay, I got my first job at 12, and I was like, okay, what can I do that I'm gonna love for the rest of my life? Because my biggest thing was watching my parents grinding at stuff that they did not love. So I was like, all right, I love health, I love wellness, I love making people happy. And I found that that allowed me to grow a lot as a person and be able to communicate with people and feel more comfortable about myself in larger environments. So when I came to Halifax, I know a lot of you guys are going to be like, oh wow, like Halifax isn't that big, but huge cultural shock to me, coming from a very, very white dominant rural community of Mabu in Cape Breton. So yeah, it was a cultural shock, and I got to reunite with a lot of my family that I haven't been connected to for many years, and that also showed me the value of building relationships and networking, and how if I just be true to myself and show people who I really am, they're going to either take that energy in and love it, and for the most part, I've had success with that. And you know, I return the same. So I really just think that building relationships and being true to self is basically where it got me to today. And I hope to just continue to you know, do those things, and keep being able to do what I love every day and help people also value health and wellness, and in turn they will, you know, become powerful, and that will lead them to success in their careers. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm all about. And like many of the other speakers touched on, like I'm very young right now, and I don't have myself figured out at all. Every day I'm having arguments with myself. I'm trying to read, books on identity, trying to figure out a lot of different things. But I know one thing, that I love myself, and it's because I take care of my body and my mind. And that's what I want to encourage other people to do, because with that comes many, many doors. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for giving voice, Ms. Clayton, but also to all of you panelists. I mean, listen, popping off in the chats, there's unlimited quotes already, and I'm just like, oh my god, oh my goodness, someone's gonna have to storyboard this. We'll have to find some ways to bring the visuals, but some of those notes, bringing a positive light into these spaces, really just trusting your process, because everyone has their own, but learn to take risks in business, understanding that in everyone's life, it could go left or it could go right, but you have to find your own voice and figure out how to pull us into these spaces. And it looks different day to day, so as we kind of transition a little bit, more into the navigation part of the segment, where really it's kind of looking at self-care, but the realities, the everyday realities in this cultural, social, economic climate. So especially if you're someone of African descent, but the other side, if you're a young professional or a professional in today's age, let alone our youth, there is so much going on, so much conflict, so much, whether it's trauma, so much connectivity, then we have COVID. And so when we look at this, there's one perspective or one mindset that might say, this is fixed, there's too much, these are just challenges. And then there's the other side of it that might see, hey, I have a vision, I have some kind of values. I'm not sure what my passion is, but I have a North Star. So how can I flip these into kind of creating opportunities? And so in this section, I would love for each of us, or each of you, I'm not going to say anything, but to kind of highlight in your process and in your journey, how have you, the first part, what is the importance for you have been to navigating these spaces, to, whether it was spaces that were toxic or spaces that just weren't for you? How have you managed to stay grounded and navigate some of these spaces to still bring your voice in? And then the second part, especially in these spaces, so maybe you get into the spaces, but then how have you, and I know Derico, we talked about this earlier, how have you integrated self-care? What is the importance of self-care if you're gonna stay in any professional setting, if you're gonna navigate any of these spaces? Is that a daily thing? That's my kind of open question, but this whole thing right here, I would love, before I pass it back over to you, really, what is the importance of being grounded in navigating these spaces, and how do you integrate self-care into your routine? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and take that, or.
I mean, I'll start off something that, so sometimes navigating these spaces, like it can be a monster. Like it can really do something to you, especially if you go through an entire education system where you don't see yourself represented, or where when you are talked about within the curriculum, it's in an inferior position. And I have to mention that, like, there is a thing such as Black privilege, because we talk about the other concept of white privilege, but Black privilege is a thing. It's not recognized. And I want to shout it out, because I'm very happy and proud to be in the skin that I'm in. But navigating these spaces sometimes don't recognize it the same way that I do. And so it's been challenging going through these particular spaces, but you have to know, this is why I go back to foundation of who I am. I'm confident in who I am, and within that, going into different rooms and navigating these spaces, I'm okay with challenge. I'm okay with conflict and all of that certain thing, because I know at the core of who I am and what I'm here for. And there's the other side of that is, turning opportunities into other opportunities. If I'm going to meet with somebody, or if someone invites you into a space, how can you flip that opportunity to continue to bring the people forward, to move the communities forward? Because often, like all of us on here are play in some big spaces. We play in some big parks with some big people. But when we're at those tables, we're never there just representing us, because we've been doing our homework in the community. We understand what the challenges are. And so when we're sitting there and we're talking, we're navigating these spaces, what I'm saying is not just me, it's all of what the community was talking about. And so, how can we flip those opportunities to create more opportunities so that we're able to move that needle forward? Because historically, the systems that we all live, work, and play in today were actually factually not built for people of color. And factually, they just were not. And so, I know Mia was going to jump in. I just want to say one thing about the self-care. It's just that the self-care thing, I think, is for me, it's a daily practice. That might be reflecting. That might be every morning when I wake up, I'm listening to something motivational. That might be exercise. But in a world where, you may be reflected differently, you may have particular challenges navigating the space and usually catching one. If you're a person of color, it's imperative to take care of yourself, because if you let your mental slip too far, it could take you to places or out of character where, you may not want to go. Sorry, Mia.
Well, I wasn't like, I was just, I think you had mentioned that you like wanted to jump in that point.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking, because I was like, yeah, like resonating, particularly when you started talking about like, and I think that's like virtual is so weird, because like when we're talking in person, we always jump in like that. But, I just think, that comment that you made about, having to go in spaces sometimes and you're there, but you've got the whole community behind you, and you have to like speak, and you have to try to consider and articulate and just how challenging it is to really do that within, I think about the Nova Scotian context. I always localize it because I kind of think about, governments and people making decisions about our communities, or even just like how to do service delivery, like just constantly, people are in these spaces and rooms trying to make decisions without us in those spaces.
Right.
And so it's like, sometimes we get in those rooms, and when we get in those rooms, it's like what is going on here? Because you're literally trying to change systems that were never built to protect us or to have us exist. And I think about that with North Preston all the time. It's like, you didn't actually want us to live, like, in that sense of, you didn't think we were going to live. And so therefore, the laws and the legalities and all the stuff that governs this doesn't consider, us. And so, we're in such a new place right now because, and I kind of wanted to bring this piece in too around like, how do you navigate, like, how do you stay grounded? And I think we often don't talk about the spiritual aspects of, not just the skin that you can see and the vessel that I'm in, but like my soul, my spirit, like, and just that folks that are in these spaces, are making decisions, about us as humans too, right? So how can we start to, get together more, with our own folk and our people, not to be like, we're excluding folks, but, spending so much time trying to navigate these spaces. And a lot of these spaces I don't navigate no more. Like, talk about self-care, like integration of self-care for me was like, I stopped showing up places. And I think that was actually kind of, me making decisions around, where I'm going to put my body, where I'm going to put my spirit, where I'm going to bring my energy, and being so intentional about that. And I think that that's kind of been, where it's changed for me, and just, rooms that don't value me, I can feel that. Rooms that don't value my people, I can feel that. And to just kind of trust that feeling, you know what I mean? And when you look around and you don't see that there's love in the room, and you don't see that spirit like there, like, I shouldn't be here. Like, and like being able to get up and walk away, like, I have no problem doing that. And that's why I think the youth right now in school, like, they're not there, like physically, they're just like not showing up. Because I think the education system is one of those places that doesn't always make you feel valued, and your story's not always there. So, you know, my heart is with the students right now, and all those educators that are working so hard to like keep the students engaged. Like, I know that you guys are working so hard, and you know, I really do feel like the youth right now, you know, them learning how to navigate, you know, I just think about that PA walkout to say, you know, Black Minds Matter. Like, just their ability to stand up for themselves is like so inspiring to me, to kind of say like, yeah, the systems need to look at this, you know what I mean? Because I'm willing to come here and give you my brilliance, but you gotta have to also let me have a learning environment that values me, you know? And I think that that's, the students are saying that. And I'm like so proud of all of the students that are kind of like making those decisions right now.
I'm with it. I want to run with one thing you said just for a second, because there's people probably listening and like, what do they mean, you know, that you didn't want us to live, or like these systems were never actually built for us? And like, for people may not know, but in Nova Scotia, the last segregated school closed in 1983. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1996. And you know, when we talk about these actually systems in their when they were born, the justice system, for example, RCMP was born out of taking Indigenous children to residential schools, and that formalized into the policing system we know today. HRP, policing in North America, started as slave catchers and night watch to capture Black people to bring them back for indentured servitude. That formalized into the system that we know today. So when we talk about these systems and we're like, it was never meant to work for me, it actually never was. And that's why we're up against, that's why when we're talking about these systems, it was never meant to work for me, or they didn't want us to survive. If you know the history of North Preston, they put people there on barren land with nothing, and people made a way where there was never a way. They didn't want them to live there. If you look at all of our Black communities, they were strategically put in particular places not to survive, but they did. But they did.
Yeah, I just said in the note, like, thanks for unpacking that, because, you know, I think sometimes I skip past those aspects because I try to maintain such a high level of like not going there, right? But that historical piece is so key, and just, you know, really being transparent of showing those histories, and for a lot of times document it within our oral knowledge. And so, you know, for young people to kind of have, and not even just young people, but people to have like that history is so important. So I just wanted to say thanks for adding that context.
Absolutely. And really, I mean, it's important too. Like, it speaks to our journey. It speaks to like the strength and the courage that we have, you know, even moving forward with that. But I'd also like to piggyback off of Mia, you know, as far as choosing like what spaces that we're in. For me, like, I was shut down so many different times, like growing up in the industry, and it was it wasn't because I wasn't good enough or anything. Um, it was mainly just because of the color of my skin and the lack of representation in the industry, for people in urban music. You know, urban is just a category they use to categorize as Black. In urban music, you know, there was no Black managers, there was no Black booking agents, there was no Black label mates, none of that. So a lot of the times I was the only Black person in the room, and um, everything was shut down. I never really it came to a point where I just kind of created my own table, you know. And that's when I opened Beals Entertainment, my company, to kind of have a seat at my own table, and kind of navigate things in that way, and just be picky, and choose the things that I'm going to be a part of, and make sure that when I am a part of them, that I have the creative control over that and the narrative that's put out, especially as a Black man. Because we all know the stigma that we carry day by day just for being who we are. And so that's kind of my way of combating it. And you know, self-care kind of ties into that. You know, it gives me time, and I give myself space as well to, you know, recover from anything, or any of those battles that we really face every single day. And it's just about being mindful of yourself and your energy and your space and your time, and knowing that it's okay to step away sometimes, and sometimes that can be powerful. um, it's just about choosing your battles wisely. You can see when something's not gonna be beneficial. And it's up to you to kind of choose your choice on that. So yeah, that's all I got.
Appreciate, like, oh my goodness, you got making it hard for me to transition out here with the mic drops, the representation, but the reality, right? Having to do it, it comes back, having to do it on your own terms while staying grounded with what you believe in, right? Sticking the course, because especially if you are not represented in these fields, or especially if there's no one in your direct line or sphere or circle, there is always a way if you have the will. And so you have to be a little bit more creative, have to bring a little bit more magic. And again, that is what this series is highlighting, how Black people, persons of African descent, have had to move, mix, and mingle differently over the last, at the minimum, 400 plus years here, but a lot longer than that in this conversation. So I really appreciate everybody giving voice to that. And before we transition again, Ms. Clayton, I would love to hear a little bit from you as well, please.
Yeah, so actually, yeah, for me, I think that, just piggybacking off of a couple of things that you guys said as well, it was extremely important for me to create my own narrative. Similar to how some of you felt basically, not your safest in the environment that you're in, or you feel like you have to hold back some of yourself in the environment you're in. And what do you do to, move on from that? Sometimes you have to move yourself from the space. And for me, it had a lot to do with creating my own narrative and creating a space. So I worked in a gym for 4 years, and I felt exactly that, like excluded from the community that I had there. And I kind of felt like I had a different mindset. I really wanted to be able to impact everybody and anybody, but where I was at, it didn't really give me the ability to do that. It also did not have a lot of diversity, a lot of culture in that facility. And I was, again, singled out in my life. And I was like, man, like, I'm done with this. So what am I going to do? And so basically on my end, I, similar to Keon, I developed a gym, a space for myself and for like-minded individuals like myself that can come together and work together and collaborate, and basically create a vibe and an environment that I feel safe in every day, and that other people feel safe in, and that other people of color feel safe in. And my facility is called Pro Agility Training. I think we've done a very great job at, creating an environment that is super inclusive. That's my goal, and that's kind of what I'm working to do with the Black Wellness Collective, is to create spaces that feel inclusive and that feel comfortable, and that we feel like we can go there and, feel good about ourselves, take care of ourselves, and feel like we're surrounded with like-minded individuals with, the same energy and vibes as us. And I think that's key in living, living and feeling good and taking care of yourself on the daily, right? So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But
Shout out Pro Agility Training.
I had the privilege of putting Derico through a boot camp once upon a time. It was a really good experience. Fit fella.
Oh my goodness. Listen, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. And I'm greatly appreciating all the insights. And hopefully, I don't know if anyone's taking any notes in the chat, but we got a lot going on. So that is my commitment before we even get to the end. We're going to make sure that besides it's just being recorded, but we're going to actually capture content. So some of the stuff in the chats, nothing that anyone says is personal is going to go, don't worry, but things that are shared in the group and that are beneficial for those that might be watching now and not able to take notes, or also for some of the youth and youngins in the schools that are unable to see right now. Shout out to not having a bedtime anymore or restrictions or anything. But yeah, we're going to make sure that we bring those out so that everyone has the accessibility piece, which is so important, especially in the digital age. Not everyone's able to make it. However, we're working with what we've got. And as we transition into this next section, this next period, we've already kind of touched on it, but I really want to highlight this, right? We've moved through the space, like hopefully everyone is aware of what the climate is, right? Even when we talk about, and this is my long segue, so bear with me, but even when we talk about like Black Lives Matter or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or any of these things, and I'm being very intentional, very specifically, they're all very important. They are all elements and things that are happening right now, so they're timely. The challenge is that if we say, oh, well, Black Lives Matter, or this movement that's just happening, or we try to put it on someone, you know, on a tragedy, very specifically, we're missing the historical context, right? We're missing the lived experience of persons of African descent have experienced over the last, myself, 27 years, just even in this chat, right? 30 years plus. And so the reality is that all of us, whether you're of African descent, but especially if you're not of African descent, there is a duty of care now that everyone is operating. If you're in an industry, if you're in government, if you're in community, if you're a practitioner, everyone now has a duty of care, which means there is a burden, there is an onus on you to mobilize and to take action. You might not have all the words, you might not fully understand why, although that is part of this challenge. You know, as you're hearing the stories and as you're, you know, the privilege of getting some of this lived experience and these insights, right? The opportunity is, how can you mobilize? How can you start to take action on your own terms, right? So building the shared language. We've already discussed and highlighted that the civil rights movement hasn't really stopped. Right now, a lot of the things that are happening, not just in North America, not just in Nova Scotia, whether it's with the Mi'kmaq Nation and you know, persons of African descent, these tensions, but there is an overall challenge to kind of injustice globally, right? Whether it's happening, you know, and Rihanna actually highlighted some of the disparities, right, in India, where it's farmers and now their internet's being impacted. So really, when we look at barriers to access that are continuing to flare up, or civil rights, this conversation's ongoing. And so as we transition into this next section, the real focus is on one part, thriving, and then the other part, mobilizing. Because in this new space, everyone, and I repeat, everyone has a duty of care to mobilize. Whatever your privilege is, whatever your power is, and everyone has both of those things, you have to figure out how to use your platform to give space to those who haven't traditionally had it, and also to give voice in a public setting when wrongs are done in public, and to use your private privileges to also hold space in private. So we're gonna go through some opportunities and some ways we can get into that. But I wanted to kind of hit pause because we've been covering a lot of ground so far, and I want to make sure that we all have some shared language before we dive into this next section. So a couple moments of pause, catch your breath, get some breathers, do whatever breathing you gotta do, sips of water, and we're gonna transition in 3, 2, 1. So whoever wants to take this as we get ready to pass it to our panelists. But when we explore mobilizing specifically, I want to talk first from the individual level. So given the climate, given everything that we've talked about, the first part of this question, how can you mobilize to build your own power? The first part of that, you know, is mobilizing, because you might, some people, and I'm thinking specifically youth or young professionals, right? You know, that traditional knowledge or narrative of you have to have it all figured out. Right? All of you have already said, I don't have it all figured out, but all of you are thriving. All of you have overcome. All of you have been resilient to this point. And so the first part of that question is, how can someone mobilize to build their power? And the second part of that question is, how would you recommend that someone, whatever hat they wear, government, industry, community, how can an individual mobilize to take action in addressing racism, discrimination of any form, whether it's anti-Black, anti-newcomer, anti-Indigenous? But what would be those two elements? So I'll kind of pause there, and I know we can build further. But yeah, what does that look like? Mobilizing on your own terms.
Well, so I'm going to start with one thing you just mentioned in the preamble, and then I'll get to a little bit of the mobility. Is just in relation to the Black Lives Matter part. I just feel compelled to just say something about it, and especially into relation to Black Lives Matter response being all lives matter, because absolutely they do. And a Nova Scotian example that normally sort of hits home with this is that, you know, for the extremely tragic event that happened that resulted in us having Nova Scotia Strong. And so when we were saying Nova Scotia Strong, it's because Nova Scotia needed attention right now. But other provinces didn't say, well, wait, all provinces strong. That just wouldn't make sense, right? And so when we say Black Lives Matter and you say all lives matter, you take away from the particular group and community that needs attention at that moment. So in terms of individual mobility, like a couple of things I wanted to say in relation to that is that, you know, we often say to young people, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I just think that that whole thing there is BS, is because young people don't have to wait to grow up, or sorry, wait to make change. It's what do you want to do? What change do you want to see in the world versus what do you want to be when you grow up? And so the thing for me is you just start. Is because often we're waiting for the right time or the right moment or the right person, but in fact, you're actually the right person, and the right time is when you get started. And so individual mobility is in my opinion, is about getting started doing something. And so like you may have to, you know, that may begin with writing some notes down or writing some things down or reading some things or talking to some people, but not waiting. Because just because you're young or just because you come from this particular background or just because you don't have, doesn't mean that you can't do, because you have what you need. It just may take a little bit of a mind shift. And the other thing is, in terms of mobility, is telling somebody every single day what you want to do. What is it you want to do? The world's going to eventually start getting out of your way. So if you know, if I want to start mobilizing something, but I keep it to myself, how am I going to get the mobility done? I may need some other people. And you probably heard of course, everyone heard the richest place in the world is the graveyard, because there's dreams and mobility that never had an opportunity to actually get moving. And so the ideas that you have in terms of mobility and change, telling someone every single day, the world is eventually going to start moving out of your way, and that mobility is going to start getting on the track, and the train is going to start moving. But you know, before beginning, there may be some inner work and some reflection and some conversations that may need to happen. I'm not saying walk out the door and just start going, because you may have to, but the key is to start somewhere. And that somewhere might be with yourself. That somewhere might be with a friend. That somewhere might be with your parents, just to talk it through. But the key is, for me, is just to start something, have the conversation, write it down, read about it, look at people that are similar, but get busy, is you know, in terms of mobilizing. And you know, like it's dirty work, like it's hard work, like it's difficult. And you know, when I say dirty, I mean like it can get messy. Like it can get messy for you internally, like it can get messy. But it's important work that everybody here on the panel and many other folks in our city do, and I think is necessary for making change. I'll wait until the collective sort of mobility part, but yeah, that's my take on individual mobility.
Yeah, going off of Derico, what he said, I think that resonated a lot with me, because that's exactly what it is that like, if you have a vision and you have something that you want to accomplish and you decided that for yourself, don't wait on other people's approval. Don't wait for permission. You know, like you have to start with what you have, and that'll go a long way. If you share your mindset and your vision with people, they'll support you. There's more people out there that support you and believe in you than at times you might even believe in yourself. Trust me, I've been in many situations where I'm like, all right, you think I'm qualified to do this? All right, I'll give it my best shot. So I think that he hit it right on the head when, like, you just have to start with what you have and go all in. And yeah, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short.
I can add a few. You know, it's you know, I think it's so funny how like what I was thinking is kind of, you know, what has already been spoken about. But you know, I keep thinking about that spark that we have as children, or just that carefreeness I don't make assumptions about all children being in this space to know what their, you know, gifts are in that way. But, you know, that's a responsibility that I think us as adults have as well, is to try to, like, you know, let children shine their light and allow them to keep it bright and to kind of really, you know, identify their gifts early. And I love to help children do that. You know, you're so good at this. Oh my gosh, I love this. And you, like, you know, just constantly like beefing up and like bigging up, you know, kids and young people. And I know being from North Preston, like, you know, and you know, and thinking about Keonte, and we're saying this in some ways, it's like, you know, that kind of love that you get from each other and just that tight knitness of community that really allows for me and, you know, for people to be seen, you know what I mean? And just like, you know, how do I, and how do we kind of keep, you know, our gifts and our skills and our talent, like keep that top of mind when we're kind of, you know, moving through life and mobilizing and using those things, and you know, constantly look for or draw back to, you know, those things that keep our light bright, you know what I mean? And that's kind of like what I'm hoping that we'll move into more as a society, you know, that we will start to recognize each other more for what we love and our passions, and see what we have in common versus, you know, what our differences might be, and just to understand and know that, like, in abundance, you know, there is no lack, there is no fear, and that we actually can continue to come together to create, to exchange ideas, to share food, to sing, to dance, and, like, you know, just be together. And that's the essence of humanity, you know what I mean? And just trying to constantly, you know, be doing that reflection. And I want that for younger people. You know, I think for me, I kind of like, I didn't take for granted being able to be young and free and have play and all that stuff. But, you know, I think at times, you know, the world gets really hectic, and I just like kind of want to keep reminding myself and everybody that, like, you know, there's so much good to lean into, and you know, I think having that top of mind, like, all the way through, is how you mobilize. You follow that energy, you follow the good stuff, you know, and you try to, you know, when you're having bad days or hard times, you kind of like have the skills to kind of lean into the good parts, especially in, you know, when there's so much pain around, you know. So that's when I think about mobilizing. It's just about keeping, you know, that beacon of light, you know, bright, in our communities. So necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, all you guys touched base on a lot of the things that I wanted to say. But definitely, like, I definitely, everything Mia said was basically dead on with what I wanted to say. Like, that's literally how we build power, by tapping into our kids' passions at an early age, you know, the things that they already love, the things that they're already ready to fight to do, the things that they're already in love with, to the point where they will go through like those ups and downs and be fine and come out of it, you know. um Keeping the light, keeping that light, and kind of expanding upon the light, you know, like that's how we build power. And now is like such a time to do that, because we have so much representation. Like, we have the singers and the entrepreneurs, we have the doctors and the lawyers for the kids to see, we have the authors and the writers, we have all these people for the kids to see. They can see that, and they can see themselves in those positions. Like, that is power alone. It's just up to us, you know, people who are parents, and also people like us who are just here to encourage them and keep them going, and keep that going. Yeah.
Can I run with something you just said, Keonte, in relation to the light? Because I think about how this just got built. Is Lemeia mentioned something, Keonte mentioned something, and we're going to build on it. Is that the light sometimes shines bright, and then sometimes the light can be dim, because you might be having a bad day, or others might dim that light. But like, one of the big quotes Lemeia just said is leaning into the good, to get your light shining again. Sometimes, man, you might need to change the light bulb because the light blows out. Put a new one in and keep it moving. And even, you know, thinking about in a dark room where that door's just open a crack and the light is peeking through. Somebody wants that door to open up so you can light that room up. But, you know, not letting your light get dim to the point where you can't put that back on. And then, as well as how can we continue as a community to continue to keep on and build up as many lights as we can. Like we want the young people walking around with the LED light bulbs so that they so that they're shining bright.
LED. I'm gonna use that with the youth now. Let me see your LED light.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. No, to be honest, right? And just recapping, you know, the power to lean in, first to identify how much good there is. And it can be challenging, especially like, you know, we have to, you know, honor that. Especially if you're of African descent, mental health and well-being looks different than the traditional conversation around mental health and well-being. But for everyone in mental health and well-being, it's a spectrum, right? You could have a series of low days. And then it's, as you said, how do you figure out when you got to replace the bulb, when you got to take some time off, and then also figure out your personal steps to actually getting that light back up, because everyone's lived experience and their support systems are different. And so as we look at that, one thing I want to do before I transition, you know, into opening it up for some other questions. Of course, I have a couple questions in pocket always, but the last thing I want to do is just kind of flip it over, you know, is give you each some space. You know, I know we've kind of been going through, you know, dropping unlimited gems. I'm not even going to count. But also, you know, when we think about our younger selves, you know, as well as the youth, the people that are coming behind us, and then, you know, on the other side, I'm always talking about youth because I feel like everybody starts off as a young person, right? And what you deal with or don't deal with, you go the rest of the journey. The rest of this journey of life, you carry it with you on the dance. And so, you know, I always want to speak intentionally to our youth, to our younger selves, but then at the same point, for everyone else that's in attendance or seeing, you know, there is a youth or a young person inside of them. And so when we're looking at this, we're talking about inclusiveness or inclusion. We're talking about diverse voices or diversity. We're talking about equity. We're talking about power, you know, so tying those things together, I would love for each of you just to give a message to a youth, whether it's a younger you, whether it's a youth right now, whether it's one in the audience and it's the youth that's inside them. What message would you give them around, you know, whether it's celebrating or exploring their power, but especially around mobilizing around their power? Because right now we live in one of the most, I mean, it's one of the most extreme times. We have the most opportunities, and at the same time, we have some of the most barriers to those places of access. And so just kind of hitting a moment of pause, I want to change the vibe a little bit and give you each an opportunity to kind of dig deep with that. And then we'll open it up a little after.
All right, I'm jumping in. So the first thing that I would say is that stay curious. That curiosity as a kid, where you're fearless to think about, talk about, explore ideas, is to stay curious, and to fail forward. Failure is a part of the journey. Failure is a part of life. But don't let the failure set you back. Let the failure propel you into keep going. You know, thinking about going to the gym, thinking about working out, that's all failure, but you're growing. And failure is a part of it. And thinking about all of that tied in together is that there's so many things that we wouldn't have if somebody just gave up on their idea. We wouldn't have a light bulb, we wouldn't have cars, but someone kept going. And so continuing to stay curious, and stick to the path and the vision that it is that you want to do. Because not everybody's going to believe in your vision, but you have to believe in your vision. And that vision has to be louder than all of the noise around you, so that you're weeding right through. Like I said earlier, is you might have to jump into the forest and then create your own village in there, because people might not want to come with you. But once they see what you're building, everyone's going to want to come and get on. But stay curious, because as a kid, we're learning, we're growing, and we have this genuine curiosity and brightness, and keep that light going. LED.
I love the LED. I'll go. I kind of was like, you know, and it's so funny, like I'm just thinking of all of these and they work so well together. But you know, I just kind of closed my eyes and I was just thinking, and it's like, you know, like don't forget yourself. You know, and I say that to all the, you know, young people who are, you know, really trying to find, you know, their place, and, you know, who are, you know, there's a lot of, I was the kid that was like kind of showing up all the time, and you know, when you take on the title of leader, you start to get all kinds of other things put on you as well. And so I think, you know, there's a part of, you know, that I'm saying to myself right now, it's like, you know, don't forget about you, don't forget yourself, because, you know, you can really lose yourself in, you know, the process of trying to even just like create yourself as an entrepreneur, you know, like thinking about what you have to do to fit into, you know, the world in terms of, you know, the types of services you're going to offer, or like, you know, for you, Chernise, like what kind of gym you're going to create. But like, you know, having to kind of like never forgetting to like do that inner work of constantly, you know, reflecting on what you want, and to center yourself in that process, and not to feel like, you know, that it's selfish to do that, you know what I mean? And to really kind of, you know, pay attention to your needs as well, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, and particularly women, like we put ourselves, you know, in the back. Sometimes, you know, we are often, you know, in those rooms and in those spaces, sometimes, you know, we are in the back, you know, it's like you can be here, but we don't want to hear you. You know, and so how do we kind of like, you know, and like I think Chernise said this earlier, like bet on yourself, you know, like just really all that self motivation. And I think the earlier you can do that as a young person, the better you are into your life, because, you know, that self and what you need is going to change all the time. And, you know, as you transition into new stages of life, you know, thinking about a family now, you know, like, what do you need? What do you want? And don't forget yourself, you know, in all of this, you know, when you're helping community, don't forget yourself, you know, like just to kind of like, don't lose yourself in that. And that's a message that I've been telling myself a lot this year, and just thinking about the self-care piece, and just really focusing on my spirit, because everybody wants you to be happy and healthy and well, you know, so it's not, you know, taking that time for yourself is never a bad thing. So that's my piece.
Yeah, for sure. I would say to definitely be patient. That's a huge one, to be patient with your process, to be bold, you know, to know your craft, to never stop learning, to learn about all of the different industries or the different segues that surrounds the one industry that you're in. You know, you got to love what you do, and when you love it, you got to love all the things that surround it too. Get to know everything that you're doing. Take time to recharge your energy when you need to. Never stop learning about yourself, but also taking care of yourself too. And Mia said that that's a big one. It's a huge one. You can get lost in this world, and in a lot of the things that hold us back. But you know, just be patient with yourself, and trust in your process. I'm a spiritual person, so I'm immediately going to trust in God, and everything that He has for you, and just know what He has for you, no one can take from you. Period. That's mine.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, for me, really going off that, trust the process. I think that's huge. There's going to be so many ups and downs, and you know, and what's key is just staying true to your vision. And that's gonna, you know, you're gonna have to step out of your comfort zone. You're gonna have to fail. And stepping out of that comfort zone, it breeds opportunity. Every time you do something different, it opens another door. So definitely don't get complacent with, you know, what you're doing. Don't think that you can't start tomorrow morning when you get up for school. You know, it just starts with that morning mindset. So I also, you know, huge emphasis on just, you know, and especially now during the pandemic, when we were, you know, taken away and had to step outside of our communities and away from a lot of our loved ones. So value relationships. I think at a very young age, developing those special relationships with people, and, you know, creating relationships with intent. And like, I really feel that success is measured by, you know, the people around you, the people in your corner. So stay true to vision, you know, trust people, and yeah, just remember that, you know, anything you want, you can get it. You just gotta put in the work, and you gotta manifest it, and you gotta trust in yourself and believe in the process.
Oh my goodness, no truer words have been said. We got to move into all spaces, right? Building relationships, going into spaces, sharing our voice. Everything comes back to that with intention, right? And it definitely takes some time. Sometimes you have to do it, at home or behind closed doors, or, only with a couple friends that, that bring the positivity back to you. But slowly but surely it builds, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is, especially in exploring your own power, it's celebrating yourself. And celebrating yourself, just like protesting, it takes different forms. You got to hit pause. You need to be in nature. You need to be with people that are like-minded. Maybe you need to eat food, drink water. Whatever it is, you have to figure out how you move and then set up the boundary conditions or set up the environment so that way you can thrive. Sometimes you have to take yourself away from your house or your friends or the PlayStation. I'm a PS guy, not Xbox, no love, it's all right. Take yourself away from some of the things you're doing, these distractions. It's a way to move forward, and it's an opportunity that we all have. You can always start. Whether it's one step or a couple. Movement is movement. We're diving in, and I think all of us are very comfortable with terms like diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think especially when we look at the systems language, a lot of us go through schools or are educated, and so we hear about these things theoretically in a textbook. Theoretically, this is what diversity looks like. This is what inclusion feels like. Tabling that into a real life scenario for all of us, whether you're living in or working in an organization, or you're in a community, whether it's mixed, very diverse, or not diverse, whether it's the organization, government, or whatever, etc. What does diversity, equity, or inclusion, what does those things actually mean? Not just a textbook definition, but what does that feel like, or what does it look like? I have an opinion, but I definitely want to turn it over to Lemeia. You kind of moving a little bit. You got some insights over there you can share with us.
Yeah, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I was like, yeah. Sorry, I was like, what?
So aside from the theory, which
Yeah.
we get in the textbooks, what does diversity and equity or inclusion, what do those feel like? What do those look like in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, diversity, I kind of, understand diversity to be like, even I like to think about I think about diversity and complexity, just like, and diversity as richness, and thinking about like how much diversity I have within my own self, how much diversity there actually is within the Black community itself. And just like, for me, when I think about diversity, I think like no limits to what might come up, and so I'm always for diversity of opinions, diversity of backgrounds, experiences. So I think we can think about cultural diversity. So you can kind of think about diversity within context of what you're talking about. And equity is just, access and making things equitable. Like, and when I say equitable, it means like everybody having, the chance to compete at the same level or to gain access to something without there being any barriers in place. And so equity is always about like, investigating where those barriers might be, or like, how is this accessible? Things aren't equitable if it's not, safe in some ways for certain people. So, I think it's these concepts, the more we talk about them, the more familiar we get with them. And hopefully, the goal is to kind of build more just and equitable spaces in my journey. And I really love teaching about what that looks like. And you do a lot of it from consulting with people. What does it look like for you? And there's no way to do that by saying, oh, like we can always be kind of working on it to make it better, but it's just ongoing. There always can be, growth in equity, inclusion, diversity, and just like these things. And so I feel like it's a practice, it's a commitment to it. If you are a person who committed to it, you'll, spaces and stuff are better. There's more sustainability, there's more richness and health, in those spaces. So those are just my take on how I practice those words.
Can I get in on this one?
Go for it.
So first thing is that like, I guess highlight the difference between equity and equality, because I see in a lot of that sort of being thrown around or businesses and organizations. And there's a distinct difference between the two. And the goal is not to treat everybody equally because everyone is different. And equity means that everybody is able to still get to the same place. Real life example, if we were treating everyone equally, we would say, well, we're going to get rid of all of the wheelchair accessible ramps, and we're going to get rid of all the elevators, because equal treatment means that everybody should be able to walk up the stairs. Equitable treatment says we need those elevators and we need those ramps so that everybody can make it to the second floor and get to that meeting. The bigger step overall is liberation. How do we actually get rid of all of these barriers in the beginning or in the first place? Because we create policies, we create practices that help us navigate the barriers that we know are there. We know these barriers are there. So how do we just friggin' eliminate the barrier completely so that we don't even have to talk about it? That's the bigger piece, is that because, you know, we've been talking about since even before the Black Report of 1994 and before the reiteration of 2000, the Black reality check in 2007, we've been talking about the inequities that we know about in the education system. We know about these, and so we want to make it equitable. But how do we just liberate everyone so we don't even have to think about these particular barriers in general? And so, you know, I'm for living in a society where we're just liberated and we're free. And so for me, I've been focused on, at least in the past few months, is how can we get to liberation versus equity, diversity, and inclusion. Absolutely, all of those elements in the pot need to be there. But for me, like, let's make a liberation soup. Throw equity, diversity, inclusion all in there, but liberation is the goal once we put the spices in. You know what I mean? So that's what it is for me. But I mean, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Like, I agree with what Lemeia said. Like, absolutely, there's diversity of opinion, there's diversity of thoughts, there's all of that mixing together. And diversity is actually what makes things beautiful. Imagine going to every restaurant and the food is the same. The name is different, but the food is the same. That'd just be terrible. But people are different, and that's what makes us beautiful. And so if you're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in the beautiful statements that went out during the BLM movements, what does your board look like? What does your staff team look like? Let's have real talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there. I could go on about that for a while, but liberation.
Listen, I'm here for it, and I think we have everybody trapped, so I think they're here for it too. We have a couple more questions, so just before that, Chernise or Keonte, wanted to make sure that you had time if you do feel like you wanted to answer them. There are a couple ones that are powerful coming in from the chats about the provincial implications for us coming together. We're gonna keep it rolling because I don't have theme music. However, next time I'll re-up and I'll bring some back. So one of the questions from the chats, without saying names, but the importance, right? We're focusing very specifically on the power and uniting. So the question is, what do you feel would be a good way to unite our Black province? We have a provincial Black seat that's coming up this year. And as a culture, we have very big decisions to make. As a community, we have big decisions to make. I think that's an open question to all of the panelists. So I would love to pass it over.
I hope it's somebody young. I think we need, as something like, what our Black provinces need is as a dynamic voice from someone who has a vision of the future that is here, because I keep thinking about the fact that, having to navigate COVID, going to school, like, I think about, like, young Greta, the environmentalist girl, and like just the young voices that come as these dynamic leaders. I would love that. I don't know if it would happen, because I know that, the political, experience is really challenging for young people. But I consider going into politics and just kind of like had the way out why I would or wouldn't. But I just think, if there's a brave young, leader that can unite us as a Black community and give us a vision for where we're at right now and the type of, things we're going to have to navigate through, based from their perspective, I'm going to lead, I'm going to follow. And I'm going to do everything that I can to kind of support that vision as well. So I want to hear from folks younger than me. And I think that's what's going to take to actually unite all of the generations that have come before that child who will go forward to be our leader, because you know, we need to kind of, you know, in our Indigenous Mi'kmaq practices, teach us 7 generations, you know what I mean? And I believe that. And I'm kind of like, you know, whatever you kind of consider young, you know, I think, but we need a voice that has, you know, some you know, some answers around what's going on right now, and not to put that on their shoulder, but like, you know, that young energy can help keep us all really focused, I find. And I miss it. I really do. I miss working with youth. COVID has made it really hard, but you know, whenever I do get a chance to kind of, you know, hang out with some kids, I'm always inspired. So maybe it might be somebody listening to this, you know, like maybe there might be somebody who actually, you know, watches this recording and thinks about, you know, how to be in that seat, you know, or feels up to it to kind of like lead us, you know, as a Black province, all of the communities across Nova Scotia. That'd be exciting for me.
I mean, I think it's definitely not a question. You know, I feel like may have all heard this question maybe in different iterations, and so it makes me think. It makes me think about a lot of things, and so, you know, unity somewhat is subjective. You know, what's unity to me might be different from the person who's asking, but folks being united, and so to sort of unite, I guess, Black Nova Scotia, parts of it we also need allies who are not Black to also be a part and engage into the same conversation if we're going to move and shift governments, move and shift policy. But we also need different, young, different, and someone who's sort of curious, not afraid to take on challenges, because there's many things that have been tried before, and there's many people who have you know, done journeys to all of our historic Black communities, and I think, you know, we need different, what hasn't been done yet, and how are we going to unite as many people together as possible. I mean, I think that there's, like, when it comes down to this sort of question around mobility, it's what are the tangibles that we actually need as Black people to advance collectively within the province. And so how then do we take those tangibles and create them into demands, or asks, or I would say demands, demands for change, because we've had enough recommendations. So let me run with that. Is that taking all of the things that Black people actually need to effectively advance within this province and move those particular things forward. How it's done is a big question that I may not have the answer to, because there's been a lot of people who have tried particular things, but advancing the collective Black Nova Scotia, I think, has to be Black people, absolutely, but as well as other folks who are willing to engage in the struggle and engage in the conversation, engage in the dialogue, and also help to open doors, create doors, build buildings, so that we're able to actually go in and have these conversations. And when I say buildings, I mean hypothetically. But here's the real for me, is that if it was up to just Black people, we would have the problem solved already. Like, that's just straight. We would have already solved it, because we obviously don't want to live in these disproportionalities anymore. And so to unite Black Nova Scotia, alongside that needs to be co-conspirators and allies who want to actually move the needle with us as well. If it was up to us, the problem would already be solved.
For sure. I definitely agree with you guys as far as you guys saying too about having a fresh young person there, you know, somebody who's bold, somebody with new ideas, somebody who's not afraid, who's assertive and you know, knows, you know, of course, like the things we need, but also willing to listen too. Like I feel like as far as uniting goes and you know, us being united, it also has to do with us having like those uncomfortable conversations so that we can even come together when we go out and fight some of these things that we're fighting for. You know, that's a huge part of it. That to unite, we have to unite with each other first, and then go out and have these conversations among the spaces with other people being in them, you know, other people of different colors and races and all those different things. So I definitely hope that we can unite on even, of course, choosing the person, but I think we definitely have a fight on our hands, and you know, we just got to be in it for the long run, and just be optimistic about it, and open to listening. That's the main thing, be open to listening.
Yeah, and just to finish with that, I completely, like, that's exactly it. Like, youth leadership is the key. You know, like, where they're setting themselves up for their future community and where they want to live in. And I think that the reality is they're very much experiencing it now and seeing it on both ends of the spectrum through their parents, through what their parents had to go through what they're going through right now. And I think the key to that is uniting the Black communities of Nova Scotia, because, you know, we have to be working for the same team. And sometimes that's not the case. Although we might all have the same vision and the same intent, it's like if we all just get on the same team, you know, we'll be moving a lot quicker in the direction that we need to be. So I think that unity is key, and collaboration, and we need a leader that can really express the voice of the community and that is willing to dive in to those communities and build those relationships and educate themselves so that they can be the voice of that community. So yeah.
Greatly appreciate everybody answering the question and everybody's patience. You know, in going through the questions as well, there's, I don't even want to put my stamp on it because I want to leave those answers as they are. The final question, you know, celebrating before I give the close and thank everyone. And the final question, and I just want to, you know, table it this way because not everyone does have a mentor directly in the traditional sense. And so the question is, and I'm going to go out and say it because not everyone was able to see. But for the attendees, the question, you know, that was asked is first part, it celebrated the power, the confidence, the positivity, maturity, and spirit of all the panelists. So just want to big up everyone because all of you absolutely have that to the fullest. The second part of this, you know, where you've already experienced trials and tribulations, failure in the traditional sense, but you've been able to come back stronger and come back wiser. On your journey, was there any mentor, anyone that mentored you specifically? And I want to take a step back just because I want to highlight mentorship and role models are very important. And especially as we look in the digital age, especially as we're acknowledging barriers to access and the importance of accessibility, mentors can come in all shapes and sizes. So can role models. It can be in your friends and family in your main circle, but it can also be online. It can be someone you read in a book or heard about in an article. And especially now, you don't even have to have met them before. You might have just seen something on Reels, something on Instagram, a 20-second clip. You're like, oh my goodness, I felt this way my whole life. So just, you know, in tabling this last part, before we transition, you know, was there any mentor in your lives specifically that helped you along the way? And if there wasn't, what has the role been of mentorship in your life as you've gone along your journey? Chernise, were you there? Maybe if I could pass it over to you, and Keonte, I know you're on deck.
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's gonna be my mom. Obviously watching her overcome the many obstacles she had to face. She had my brother at 16, myself at 18, completely on her own, and strong, beautiful, very expressive woman. And she basically, yeah, I owe everything to her in terms of my confidence, in terms of the way my mindset is and where my heart's at. Another big shout out is to a woman I met a lot later in life. Her name is Benita Bungie. She is a professor at St. Mary's University. I met her my third year when I was just at the cusp of giving up. I was 3 years in and I was done. I was gonna quit. I had 2 years left because I was part-time student. So I wanted to call it quits. And this professor, man, like I've never had someone touch my heart in such a small amount of time, but she got me out of a really dark space. She kept me in school single-handedly for sure. And I swear I wouldn't be where I am even today. And this was only a couple years ago without her coming into my life. So huge shout out to her. Another and finally mentor in my life was my business partner, Ben McKeel. He really showed me the value of manifesting and of just reaching for something that you never thought you would have. So yeah, he very motivated me to step out of my comfort zone and to put everything on the line, everything to get what I wanted. And yeah, those are my three people that I definitely say helped me to got me to where I am today. And I hope you guys have some very important, strong people in your life that you can look up to and that are guiding you in positive directions.
Thank you so much, Keonte. Over to you.
Sure, yeah. I've definitely had a plethora of different mentors in my life, honestly, so many. And I think that kind of speaks to why some of the things I do is so diverse as far as creatively in the projects that I release. And just to name a few, I can definitely say Sean Downey, Renee Smith, and the list could honestly go on. But I think number one for me was definitely my mom. They're for real, and this is just me, just my opinion, but there is nothing like the strength of a Black woman. And those are kind of like the shoulders that I ride on. Like I see her work so hard my whole life. And just watching her do that slowly develop the work ethic in me. Even today, it's almost like I'm trying to match her level of excellence, okay? And I'll never get there. I could never get there to her place. And for me, I think I also had the benefit of living and coming from a family with strong female voices. So it was never strange to me to see females leading the way, being bold, being courageous, and going for the jugular, and just kind of doing their thing, right? So yeah, I just want to give a big shout out to even just the women in my life. They've kind of opened my eyes, and they see things that I can't see, and they inspire me so much. That's all.
Thank you so much, Lemeia. Derico.
Go ahead, Lemeia.
Want to go?
All right,
You
I'll go. So the first, so there's a couple people, and I mean, a thing I want to mention is that like, there's been people who have come into my life at different points. Like they come in and drop us some knowledge, drop some gems, and then I just might not hear from them again. But like it was a big part, and so, I always talk about my mom. My mom for me was the first person, like the first actual sort of symbol and sign of like dedication and hard work. Um, my mom worked a couple of jobs. My mom did some other things to like make sure that we had what we needed. Times of like acting like she wasn't hungry because there wasn't enough to go around, to make sure that we had food in our stomach so that we're able to grow and do what we can. And so that's the first real shout out for me. And the other people, like he might hate me for saying this because he don't really like to be mentioned, but people probably know Maurice James or Doodles. But like I've known this guy, like he's known me literally since I was like 5. And I don't know what it was, but like took me under his wing sort of thing at the recreation center. And like, that's where I got my first job. Like I started working when I was 15 because of him. And then as well as Craig Myra, who works principal at school in Spryfield, and like took me under, got me a job at the recreation center. And I was working 1 hour a week at $6.25 an hour. So I was balling. And the other sort of pivotal person. And so when I talked about people kind of coming in your life and doing something or dropping a gem and leaving, was the moment in high school. Black guidance counselor, his name was Clyde Paris, and in his office, and he said, "Look, Derico, I'm going to sign you up and pay for university right now." And I was just like, "Man, if you don't sign me up right now, I'm not going. I'm just not going." And he signed me up, and I went to MSVU, and like life sort of took off from there. But that was literally a pivotal moment, in a pivotal time where I'm sitting in an office with Black men, and he's just like, "You got to do this." And so those are the people for me, but people come in and out, many people, and some I might be forgetting, but drop gems, knowledge, and guide me, and then I might not hear from them again. But those are some of the pivotal folks for me.
Cool. I love this. And, I think it's just, I love the question. So thanks so much, Madame Jean, for bringing that in. I keep thinking about my grandmothers, I think, because I think about where my mom and where my dad and where my family learned how to be, the strong people that they were. And so I think, I always think about my ancestors in that way, because I think there's a lot of their story that we don't know. But, the pain that they had that they don't talk about, but, they kind of radically loved us and showed love, and showed us God, through the way that they were and are. And so I think for me, when I think about, my mentors, and, I kind of think about my ancestral, and grandmothers is nothing more than, like just think about grandma's kisses and food and love, radical love that they showed, that then, our my mom and, my dad and folks kind of, brought that down. And then I had some really good teachers, Miss Marlene Rock Symonds was my grade 1 teacher. And, seeing a Black woman teach a class at grade 1 totally, changed my experience early. And so I'm really loving that, there's so much that was I'm just able to kind of talk about that now. Like I had a Black woman teacher when I was young. So that totally changed my view and my experience in school. A lot of great teachers along the way. And then, I'm thinking about someone who's really special to me, my big brother, Corvell Beals. So if anybody knows Corvell, you know that he's a person who is a giant, like, thinker, brilliant, genius, so humble. I have a lot of siblings and I love them all. I find we all like bring that mentorship to each other, but definitely have to kind of shout out like Corvell in all of the ways that he supported me and loved me. I think it really kind of comes down to, how do we work through, the challenges and all that kind of stuff. Like we love through that, and people show us love, and make us feel like, the gifts that we have to give to the world are worth, keeping here and showing up every day. So I just want to say thank you to all of my mentors and everyone who just continues, even this group, like we love each other. Like it's all love when we link up. And, like I couldn't imagine being from another place. I love Nova Scotia. I love that we landed here, and that we're here together, and that, everyone's going to know about us and already do, but like nation to nation, like, we are liberated, you know what I mean? And so I'm just in this really beautiful space right now of really claiming that and being open and honest about how we're doing it. We're not trying to make it a mystery, we're not trying to not tell the story about how we literally are getting through right now, you know what I mean? And what we're leaning on and how, we're kind of, anyways, yeah, I have, this is such a big question for me, and just think about the youth too, and just all the love that they continue to share, because I'm constantly learning from the younger generation. So yeah, big question.
So I don't want to, but I'm gonna, I guess reel it in. I just want, I have to start with just giving all of our panelists, Lemeia, Derico, Keonte, and Chernise, a big thank you, a big warm welcome, especially Chernise. You pivoted last minute. We moved you ahead in the series to come and fill the spot where Miss J, unfortunately had to pivot out. Some things popped up, so we're very grateful that you're able to join us and keeping it humble. All of you really just dropping so many insights, being vulnerable. Appreciate everyone who attended both live and also across the different mediums, because being respectful in the space is a part of listening. And I know I made it, I forced your hand a little bit by putting it in webinar, but that's also part of the series, right? Part of growing is learning to listen, learning to hear some of the voices. And I'm very grateful because it was a privilege. And I absolutely feel empowered from the panelists and the stories and the voices that we had. So it was recorded. We're going to continue the conversation. I want to thank all of you attendees for tuning in, because there's all kinds of other places. Not really, there's nowhere else you could be right now. It's still COVID, you can't do too much. But I really want to thank you all for joining. Next week, we're back for part 2, gonna dive all the way into the social power side of things. So next Friday, February 11th, same time, same place on the Zoom, safely practicing COVID protocols. You know how we do it here in Scotia. But I want to thank everybody and wish you all a good night. Stay safe, stay warm. Winter is still in full effect, but most importantly, stay you. And let's build some momentum. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.